And I believe now what I would want to do is incorporate my mom
Oh, okay.
and maybe kind of do like a generation thing.
Uh-huh.
So, because
Great.
really in my house, it's really just me, my mom, and my sister. So I think it'd be cool to have portraits of us and showing like the ages that we are now and then look back at it. And with it being a project, I thought it was a great like opportunity to show time in the future.
Yes.
So like kind of pre like pre-working on what I'm gonna do later, because the pictures that are present now, we're gonna look so different like 5 years. So I think it'd be super cool to like encapsulate our time that we have right now. So I
Right.
think I'm gonna incorporate my mom into my project.
That's great.
Yeah.
Very, very nice. I like how you've expanded it.
Yes.
That's great. You know, and with all of these that you all are doing, you know, it's something that you can continue on, and you know, maybe not with the same kind of intensity because it wouldn't be a final project, but something that you can keep adding to periodically, you know, over the years would be wonderful. And Emily, how are things coming with you?
So they're going pretty good. I was kind of working. I have a couple, I don't know. I can share my screen and I can show
Yeah,
if
why
you
don't
want
you
to
do
see
that?
some of them.
Sure.
Um, Let me see if this will work because I have like multiple. Okay, if I switch between them, can you still see?
Yes.
Okay. So I kind of had this idea of doing more like macro sort of um, shots, and these were some that I did. These are three of them. So there was this one, and I was kind of going in between either doing color or black and white, which I do black and white um, to um,
Your audio is sort of breaking up a bit.
oh,
Well, now you're okay, but just once in a while it breaks up.
it's probably my internet.
So are you looking at going one way or the other, like black and white or color, or are you going to mix it together?
Um, I don't know. I was kind of thinking going one way or the other, but I guess I could kind of mix it. That might have a little more freedom as far as like creativity, just so that I don't feel like I'm stuck doing one or the other. If I really like an image in black and white or I really like it in color, I could just have both.
Yeah.
Um,
Also, it you know, when you might really decide on that is the night before
right.
the night before your presentation. No, seriously, because by that time you would have, you know, you'd have like your collection of work, and then
Mhm.
you're putting your collection of work in some type of order or layout, and a lot of times that's when you can make that kind of decision, because obviously it's not um, too time consuming to switch something from color to black and white, or if you start off,
Right.
you know, just duplicating your black and white and then create another file that's in color, you know, you have both.
Right. That's kind of what I did for this because I wanted to kind of see how they looked together.
Uh-huh.
Um, and if that was kind of the route that I wanted to go. Um, Also, I mean, we've talked about it before, but putting things in black and white can sometimes make them a little bit more abstract. And
Yeah.
so deciding whether I want it to be, I mean, it's already more abstract being such a close up photo, but you know, exactly how abstract you want it to be. Um, so I think it's kind of just going to come down to when I look at the big picture and the project as a whole, how I
Right.
want it to be perceived.
Well, also, remember, I'm trying to remember whose images that was. It was on one of our Tuesday assignments in class of where there was a black and white version and a color version of the same thing side by side? Whose was that? Was that Jasmine? Was that yours? Remember, do you all remember that image of
I do not remember whose it was.
yeah, but it could be as a thought that you use both of them, use the black and white and the color, in your layout. I mean, it would be different, but I could sort of see like a book, even though I know you're not doing a book, but I could sort of see a book like the left-hand side of the page is color and the same thing, same image on the right-hand side, black and white. And as you flip through the book, you have the same image on as you turn the page, but one version on the left and another version on the right. And it's sort of like the viewer can react to each one of them differently. Something to think about. But you have time to figure it out.
Yeah.
Even though it'll come down to Monday night before class.
Yeah. Yep.
That's how it works, I know. Okay, well, good. So it sounds like everybody's putting in the time and effort to have some cool projects. So that's great. Glad that you're all involved and inspired to do this. All right, so for tonight, what I want to do is introduce you to a lady's work that is actually a good friend of mine. And she does fantastic alternative processes and media. And she's also an example, I think, of a pioneer, I'll say, because she's my age, so she's been in the business for a little bit. But when she started in the business, like in the 70s, as a really young photographer, a young woman, who then got married and had a family, she had to figure out how to keep photography in her life, as basically a working mom. And she had three kids and was doing wedding photography, and then wound up getting divorced and became a single mom with 3 kids, kept her business going, became quite successful. She started off in Indiana in the Midwest, and then eventually moved out here to the West Coast. And along the way was influenced by several other women in photography as that part of our industry became more diversified over the years. And I think she's like a wonderful example of somebody that was able to adjust to a particular lifestyle and be very successful and segue from doing weddings and family portraiture, which, at that time was very traditional. So very traditional looking wedding photography. But she also made time to explore and experiment with alternative processes and fine art photography. And now, of course, she's, I would say, pretty much retired from doing any wedding photography or family portrait photography, and devotes all of her time to doing personal workshops and selling her fine artwork. And it sort of is, I think, a real tribute to women of her age that entered into these professions that were all male dominated at the time. And photography was no exception to the rule about that was a man's world, as you probably can assume or either know because of looking at the history of photography. And so I really have always admired her as far as her tenacity and her passion for the work. and her creativity. She was also a faculty member eventually at Brooks, where we taught together, and I became very good friends with her. And so I want to review her work with you, and she'd be, I think, a great source of inspiration because she's constantly coming up with new themes that she follows through. And that sort of relates to like your final project, you know, coming up with a theme and then of course executing it. And along the way, maybe finding something else that you hadn't done before, and that leads to another project and so on. So let me switch the screen over to Joyce Wilson is her name. So Joyce lives up here in Santa Barbara, and this is sort of an example of her work in the fine art area. And she has quite a few patrons that buy her limited edition work. And she also does personal like workshops. So she'll have maybe a maximum of 3 or 4 people that will come out to Santa Barbara for 3 or 4 days, quite expensive. And they will have her mentor them in some of the techniques that she uses. And as we see in her work, as we go through this, you'll see in her work, she uses a lot of different types of techniques, some of which we've talked about, some of which you've explored, and then others that would probably be new to you. But you can see she just has a classic style for composition, lighting, and understanding, you know, a vision, a particular vision. So I want to start with going to her new work, and these are all like collections or themes. So let's look at Allure of Red. And so this is like a great example of a collection of work based on a theme. And the theme with this, as it was called, Allure of Red. So as we go through this, you can see the subtlety with which she uses the concept of red in her images, but also, you know, she's being having the continuity as far as the tonality of the image, and we'll just go through, make sure going through these, and the quality overall of how she's seeing the lighting, composition, the subject matter. So if it wasn't the fact that these were all in this particular collection and you were just looking at these images individually, you would sort of get a different sense from them as individual. But when it's all put together as a collection with the subtle fact of red being part of it, it really becomes inspiring, I think. And you can see, you know, she has beautiful lighting techniques. So she does multiple layers, you know, like in Photoshop, she'll use other types of materials in front of the lens, and then is not afraid to use Photoshop. And she grew up in the analog age. So a lot of this was all done in the darkroom previously, where she would make multiple exposures onto the enlarger and then get this kind of effect, sepia tone effect in post darkroom work. And this is new work from her. And what's inspiring is that she's older than I am. She's a bit older than I am. And you can see that her creativity is very contemporary. Age has no bearing when you're working in a creative field. let's see. We'll go to one of their other collections. Sanctuaries. So, and she uses all different types of formats, from Polaroid to 2 1/4 to 4x5, both analog and digital. So she still does analog work and darkroom work, but she also does quite a bit of digital and digital post-production. And the other thing I would say that I would want you to take note of is, like in this collection and the other collection, she mixes like aspect ratios, so, cropping, which is sort of different when you put a collection of work together. You would sort of think, well, that you want to have the continuity of the same aspect ratio of imagery, but you can see, she makes that work extremely well. Pretty amazing. And she's also become a very good painter. So she mixes sometimes that in with her photography, applying it later in the process, like this one. And let's see, we'll look at these. This is from her painted collection. So you can see she's very influenced by the Cubist Picasso. So you can see that she works both with pure photography, altered photography, pure painting, and altered, photography and painting together. And then one of the things I want you to, that we want to look at is, where did they go? Is I want to show you this video of hers that is on a particular technique that she uses. So we'll watch this video that she has.
Hello, all you artists out there. I'm Joyce Wilson, and I'm in my studio in Santa Barbara, California. I love it when other artists are willing to share secrets about their processes. and I'm going to play forward a little secret that I discovered. About 10 years ago, during a period I was teaching at Brooks Institute, they shut the dark rooms down and told all of the faculty that we had to teach with digital and inkjet printing, and we didn't have the dark room anymore. So I've had to figure out some ways that my students could do art projects without doing the beautiful lith printing and some of the stuff we were doing in the darkroom. I'd been experimenting with metallic leafing and inkjet printing, and it was working really well. But then I had the opportunity to be in New Orleans. I walked into the A Gallery and I saw these absolutely stunning large prints by Jeff and Vanessa Louvier. And I kept looking at them and I thought, something's different. I knew it was metallic leafing that I just couldn't sort out. Well, it wasn't long after that, back in New Orleans again for a conference, and I had the opportunity to be at dinner with Jeff and Vanessa. And they very graciously shared their story and their little secret. And voila, it was art resin. So I'm going to pass that forward, and I hope you'll enjoy this. Okay, we're going to get started, and I'm going to share this process for you of working with photographic prints, metallic leafing, and resin. So first of all, you want to select an image that has a lot of light areas in it. This is a finished one, but if you'll notice, the background area of the crow is very light, which allows the luminescence of the leafing to show through. So make sure that's the type of image that you select. And then on this one, I actually went in before we poured the resin and used pastels to enhance some of the color in the background. After you've selected your image, you're going to find cradle boards or flat boards, it doesn't matter, a Masonite board or a cradle board, and gesso the board. Here's the gesso. You either use a white or a black gesso. If the image is real pastel, you make sure you use white. If it's a darker image, then the black gesso is great. Once you've gessoed the boards, then while that's drying, your next process is to print your image. And I use Japanese rice paper. But be sure that you tape your paper to a substrate, because if not, when you run that through the printer, it's going to crinkle. There's one that crinkled really badly, and you get all this mess. So be sure that you adhere your paper to a substrate, and I use linen hinging tape, the line coat, and then just adhere the bottom and the right, it would be the right side as you're running it through the printer. Once you've got your paper ready, then you're ready to start working with the metallic leafing. Make sure your board that's been gessoed is nice and dry, and then you're ready to place a gold leaf metallic adhesive. And you can do this with a sponge brush or just a stiff artist brush, but you place that on top of the board and let it dry for about 60 minutes so it's tacky. If it's not tacky enough, then add another coat. Once that's set up and just tacky, you're ready to start with the gold or metallic leafing. I love using the silver or the gold, and there's 3 different companies. 2 of them, Old World Art and Mona Lisa, are both available from most art stores. They have gold, silver, and copper. The simple leaf, which is this Mona Lisa one, comes with an adhesive backing. So it's like a little tissue backing, and you just put it on and then pull your leafing off. That's the easy way. If you're using the leaf products that are very sheer, they float in the air and they're really tough to work with. If you're going to use those, then you need this little gold leaf brush, or it's a metallic leafing brush. And this one's called Polynesia. They're about $39. And you have to do it very gently. So cover your whole image with your metallic leafing. You're going to let that dry, and then we're ready to move on to the next process. And first of all, I want you to be sure that you watch the Art Resin video. It's called Art Resin 101, and it's on their website. This gives you all the information to set your station up and how you work with pouring the resin and keeping bubbles out and keeping everything very level so that the resin just smooths out beautifully. So watch that video, and now we're ready because we've got our board ready, we've got the metallic leafing on it, and we're ready to start with the resin. You're going to do one pour on top of that beautiful gold leaf or metallic leaf, the silver, whatever color you've used. And once you've got this one pour on there and it's spread out nice and even all over your board, you take your image that you're ready and make sure that it's the size of your board. It can be a tiny bit bigger if you want, but make sure that you drop it down on there real carefully and fill the whole area and then spread it out. You can use a sponge brush, but spread it out so that it drops right down into that resin. It'll float down through there and it'll settle down. Then you let that sit for a while. You're going to let that settle in for about an hour, and then you can pour another coat of resin right on top of that original one. Once this is all done, you let your image dry overnight. Next day, your board's all ready with your artwork embedded in that beautiful coat of the art resin. And by now you've got 2 coats on there and it's settled in. So there's 2 options. You can either put another coat on there and let it be very, very luscious and brilliant with that 3rd coat, or I enjoy kind of a matte finish on some of my work, and I use a 400 weight fine, extra fine sandpaper, and I sand it very, very carefully. There's also an 04 steel wool that works, and you just sand really carefully, and you'll get the smoothest, most beautiful matte finish. Then you're almost ready. You either leave it like that, and also the very shiny one, or there's one other way to finish them off. You can actually use a layer of cold wax and just rub that over the print and keep smoothing and buffing it. And voila, you're all finished and you have a beautiful work of art. Here's one that I've used with the matte finish. And this one I'm particularly proud of. One last finish touch. You can either use the leafing on the edges of your cradle boards or just sand them down a little bit and paint them with a black or color oil paint that matches your image, whichever way you'd like to finish them. Thank you all for watching this video. A special shout out to the team at Art Resin for allowing me to present this for you, and also to my cohort from Brooks Institute, Ralph Clevenger, who so professionally filmed this for us. I hope you'll all take a chance to enjoy and experiment and play with the Art Resin products.
Okay. What she also has on here is a complete sort of step-by-step of what she just went through. So if at some point you get really ambitious and you want to take that on, it's an amazing process. So I actually spoke with Joyce earlier today, and if any of you feel like you want to contact her at some point, or send her some of your work to get like some input or critique, she'd be open to that. So I'll post her her email, which is actually on her website, but I'll post it. So if you feel like contacting her, she loves to work with students. She's a really great person. Okay, so let's stop this share. Anyway, any questions about Joyce? Okay, she should be an inspiration to look for. All right, now the next thing that I want to sort of bring to you is a little bit about filtration over the camera, which is going to relate to a little project I'm going to have you do tonight in class again. So working with diffusion type of materials in front of the camera or in front of your cell phone. So the first thing I want to do is have you take a look at a little comparison about different, well, two main types of filtration. So I'm not sure if any of you have heard of the black pearl mist filters or diffusion filters, which I think we covered that in the Masters of Light. And then also Harrison & Harrison fog filters. And then I'm just going to show you a quick little thing I did today that will relate to probably what you're going to do for in class today. So let's take a look at this video on the black pearl mist. I can bring it up here. Hang on one sec. Okay, so this is sort of in, let's start it back here.
I promised a lot on this channel before. Now that's a low contrast softening filter that you put on the front of your common lens to kind of let the highlights bloom and lift the shadows a little bit, just to give it a more quote unquote cinematic feel. But there's a lot of other filters on the market that can do a similar thing, and maybe at a different cost, depending on what size you get, or maybe just give you a different type of halation in the highlights, or maybe don't lift the shadows if you don't want the shadows lifted. And I've got a couple in today that I want to try out, and we're just going to kind of compare them to the Tiffen Black Pro Mist. I'm going to be using the quarter Tiffen Black Pro Mist for this test. That's the one I commonly use on set, and for almost all the videos that I use a filter like that for.
So just a quick note, the diffusion filters come in different steps. So from very, very light, almost not noticeable, to very heavy. And as you'll see, and maybe you already know this, that as you increase the diffusion, the highlights have more halation around them. And that usually spills over into the shadows. And so what happens is that you wind up with a lessening of contrast overall in the image as you increase the level of diffusion that is over the lens.
Now, to have a controlled lens for this, I'm going to be using the Sigma 18-35 because it's a very common lens that most people have in their kit. And it's not like too sharp, but not too soft. It won't be like one of my vintage lenses that's already going to kind of bloom the highlights anyways. So we can have a little bit more of a controlled lens to work with. Once we kind of compared all these filters just by looking at this shot, then I might throw on one of my vintage lenses and we can see how that even accentuates that vintage look even more. Now, to light this to kind of show you how the blooming is going to work, I'm going to do a very simple setup. I've got the Nanlite Pavo tube behind me, which is kind of shooting right into the lens. And that's going to already bloom the lens just a little bit. It's going to make those highlights kind of bloom out like that. And when we put the filter on, you should see that accentuated. And then, of course, I just have an Aperture 120D Mark II bouncing off the wall over here, just as my little key light. And we're shooting on the Ursa Mini 4.6K. So currently we have the Sigma 18-35 at f1.8 at 35 millimeters with nothing in front of the lens. Okay, So this is with the quarter Tiffin Black Pro Mist on the Sigma 18-35. So you can clearly see what that Nanlite Pavo tube is doing in the background now. It's completely, I mean, for lack of a word, blown out. It's blooming all over the place. And my shadows are probably lifted a little bit, but they don't look too bad. There's still enough contrast in the image to not completely wash it out. Now, there's a couple other filters I want to test today against the Tiffin Black Pro Mist. One being the Prism Lens Dream Effects filter, which I have in a 4x5 size filter, which I'm going to use with the little Tiffin mini matte box here, put that on. And then this Tiffin's a 77mm right now. So then I'm also gonna be able to compare the, this should just be coming out this week, the Moment Cine Bloom filter. So now this filter should act very similar to something like a Pro Mist. I haven't tested it yet, so I don't exactly know how it's gonna look, but I'm guessing it's gonna do the same thing. It's gonna be a little bit low contrast compared to the stock lens, and it should also bloom the highlights, kind of give you that quote unquote filmic vibe. So it's kind of nice. It's got a nice little red ring on it. It's got grooves on the filter itself, so it's easier to pull on and off the lens. So using a softening filter is very common. You'll see in a lot of like commercials and even in Hollywood, because otherwise, when you're shooting on these digital cameras, you probably heard it before, things can start to look a little bit too sharp. So I'm going to take off this Tiffin Black Pro Mist and I'm going to throw on the Moment Cine Bloom next. And then after that, we'll throw on the Dream Effects. All right, so now I put on the Moment Cine Bloom filter. This is the 10%. I believe they have one that comes in 10% and a 20%. So it's obviously going to be different intensity on how much this filter is actually affecting the lens itself. You can see right now that the Nanlite Pavo tube is still very bloomy. From what I can tell, just swapping these really fast, it seems like it's a little less bloomy than the quarter Pro Mist, but maybe the 20% version of this filter might bloom even more. I don't have that one in right now to try out. They just sent me the 10%, which by the way, Moment did send me this lens to try out. And I'm just borrowing the Dream Effects and I already own the Tiffin. So just so you know, there's a really big biases going on here. I've been using the Tiffin for like 8 years now on all my shoots. So obviously I like that a lot, but we'll see how this Moment and the Dream Effects compare. So there's some color in the background. There's a white wall in the background. I'm also wearing blacks. You should be able to see those blacks kind of lift up if there is a low contrast situation happening on this filter. Okay, so I'm going to throw on this Tilta mini matte box and then the Dream Effects filter and see how that looks as well. Yeah, I would say Dream is a good name for this filter. Look at the halation on that Nanlite. It is out of control. It's definitely peaking. I definitely let it blow out a little bit and just to kind of see how much it's really going to accentuate when we put this in front of the lens. Now the Sigma 18-35 isn't a super sharp contrasty lens compared to like a modern Canon lens or something like that, but it does have way more contrast than like say one of my vintage Canon FD lenses. So it's really going to take the edge off of one of those lenses like that if you're trying to get that kind of more quote unquote filmic look. Something else to note is that when you put one of these filters in front of your lens, it's also going to just soften it. It's going to make the lens less sharp. But in a lot of ways, that's a good thing because honestly, you don't want it to be too sharp to your eye unless you're doing something that's very specific that you want a lot of sharpness. And it comes with a nice little pouch that you can put it in, but it's also obviously a bigger filter and you will need a matte box for that. This is a more standard size filter that you would find for regular cinema camera matte boxes. First one of these, like the Moment or the Pro Mist that I'm using is designed, these are 77mm, but I believe they come in 82mm and they come in other sizes, of course, for different size filter rings on your lens. The Moment also comes with a really nice case. It's made out of metal, it seems, and it's a screw top thing. So it's really going to protect your lens. If you threw this somewhere, I don't think your lens is going to break. It has padding inside, which is really nice. Whereas the Pro Mist, when it ships to you, it doesn't really have much of a case. It's just a kind of a little black case. It's not going to protect it like these other two cases might. Okay, so now this is what these all kind of look like side by side. With the Sigma 18-35, but I'm going to throw on my Canon 35 FD lens, a vintage lens. It's already going to have a little bit of low contrast to it, a little bit of kind of weird character to it in the highlights, and we'll see how these filters look on top of that versus using a sharper modern lens like this Sigma 18-35. would say looking at these just back to back, just by throwing them on and looking at the monitor, they all definitely have a different look. And I would say that they're all like just a different intensity. Obviously, this Dream Effects is very, very strong intensity when it comes to blooming those highlights compared to the 10% moment. It's not blooming as much. It's more of a subtle look. If that's kind of what you want, you just want to just take the edge off of one of those sharper lenses. That might be the one for you. And then the Tiffin Black Chromas is kind of in between. Tiffin's been around a long time. They're a very reputable company. So keep that in mind when trying to choose your filter. Whereas Moment, you know, they just started making filters, but not to say that these filters are bad at all. I mean, then Dream Effects, same thing, very, very new company. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. You could even just take your thumb and take a little oil off your nose and smear it on your lens if you want to get a different effect. There's a lot of ways you can change how your lens reacts to light. It doesn't matter if it costs a lot or not, or if it's from a reputable company. All right.
Okay, so that's sort of where I wanted you to get to with this. Let me stop the share here for a second. So the reason that we're talking about filters and diffusion filters is that it's a way to, again, become a little bit more creative with your camera, whether it's your DSLR or even your cell phone camera. It's a different way to alter reality in a sense. And the other thing that I would point out that he brought up was using older lenses from analog days on digital cameras, that those lenses, when you put them on digital, soften slightly the digital clarity. So it's a way that you can sort of come up with unique looks that we're always searching for in photography. Is, you know, how can I make my images a little bit more unique, or I want to experiment with something different. So keep that in mind, because you can buy older lenses really cheap on eBay and have a great collection of lenses that you can adapt to your digital. Of course, wind up shooting all in manual control for the lens for focus and aperture control, etc. But it is a way that you can experiment with, creating a different look. So, those filters like the Black Pearl Mist are pretty expensive. So, if you go online, you can see if you wanted to buy one for your camera, you're going to wind up spending anywhere between $75 to $150, depending upon, the manufacturer. And so there's other ways that, and he was alluding to that with taking sort of the oil off of your nose and putting it on your lens. And there's other ways that you can do this fairly cheaply and also experiment and have a lot of fun. So that's sort of what we're going to do tonight. So let me bring up the screen here to share with you. Okay, so here's something I just did a little bit earlier in the bright sunlight. So, the effect of using a diffusion filter is a way to control contrast. That's number two. Number one is it will soften, depending upon obviously what intensity of filter you're using over the lens. But the second effect of it is it also helps for contrast control, and it can make other parts of your image more subtle in using diffusion over it. So I'm not going to use diffusion over my Harrison & Harrison or Black Pearl Mist filters over this. This is the setup I just did at my back patio with the bright sunlight. But what I want to show you is a way that we can sort of have control over an effect with very little cost. So here was with no filtration or any adjustment in front of the lens. And then as I go through these, you can see a slight change. And what I'm using is a piece of optical glass, or a Harrison optical glass filter over the lens. And so the areas that I want you to sort of look at, and you can see change quite rapidly, is the highlight areas, like over here. Oops, let me get this off. These highlight areas over here and in the corners. So I started off with the glass over the lens with nothing on it, and then took a little Vaseline and started spreading it around the edges, and just started bringing it in a little bit more and a little bit more. And so the whole image is not diffused. You can sort of see I've created a little hole basically where we're getting, this is still pure image. It's not altered at all. And you can control the look just by simply where you spread the Vaseline and how much you put on it. And then this is even going a little bit further. So somewhere in there, is where maybe I would want to make some of adjustments and control it. And so you could say, well, why can't you just do all of that in post-production, which, in Lightroom, you can do it fairly easily, where, you're using the clarity slider and the, what's the other slider? The diffusion slider. And then you can go in with the eraser tool and play around with it. But I sort of like to not sit in front of the computer for hours doing something like that. I'd rather do it in front of the camera where, I'm involved with it and I can see it and tweak it. I just feel that's more part of the creative process. And I'm not sitting in front of a computer for 3 hours. If I'm going to do something for 3 hours, I would rather be behind the camera and play with it. This, took basically 30 minutes to do. So here's my setup. And so you can see this. Now this is a fairly expensive optical glass filter. So it's optical glass, meaning it's more expensive. And it's a Harrison filter. So I think at the time I bought this, it was probably like $125. Today, it would probably be $300. And the way that I put this on the lens, a lot of filters on the lens, is using gaffer's tape. So this is a very cheap way, instead of having the matte box, which, the matte boxes cost anywhere from $250 to $500, depending upon what camera you're using. But if you take 2 little strips of gaffer's tape and roll them up, put that on the side of your lens, and then stick the filter on it, the gaffer's tape will hold it. So this shows there's no Vaseline on it. And then here's just another angle of that same thing. And then you can see the Vaseline and the little clear spot right there in the middle that I'm using. And again, you can sort of adjust this and play with it to control the amount of altering you're doing and where you want the Vaseline to be. So it can be a lot of fun besides getting the effect. Another very inexpensive rendition. So this is taken on my iPhone with nothing over the lens. And you can see that it's a pretty contrasty backlit scene. So, we're not really seeing any detail in the black at all. And then I took another photo of it with a little plastic bag, clear transparent plastic bag that I put the camera in, and did this. So it gives that same kind of effect overall of reducing the contrast and softening it slightly. So the cost for this was $0, because it was a package that something else that I had ordered online came in. The cost for this, is the Vaseline And instead of using not an optical glass filter, you could use saran wrap, any kind of clear wrap, or you could use a little piece of plexi. Pretty much anything that you have laying around that you can stick on in the front of your lens that's clear, and then put Vaseline on it. I would say don't put Vaseline on your lens. And I would be very cautious about even using, as he was suggesting, your oil from your nose to put on your lens, because that, if you have like a UV filter over your lens, maybe do it on that, because you could clean that off. But I would really advise against putting anything directly on your lens like that. Okay, so any questions on what you just saw as far as how we're altering contrast and adding a slight effect to that particular sequence? All right, so that means you're ready to go. So what I would like for you to do is produce 2 solutions using this kind of technique, so you don't have to use the expensive technique. You can use the cheap technique. This is the package that I put my cell phone in and shot, through the transparent side. And let me just grab. So this is my Hasselblad camera, and you can see, if I hold it back up here, you can see that it has the $500 box on it. And so this is what we would use, where we could slide a little filter in here, and we could put another fill in front of that. And then this is a bellows extension also that would control for lens flare. But that's like a $500 setup. So what I've been showing you is really cheap, and you probably have something laying around the house that you can either do this on your DSL, or you can do it on your cell. So what I'd like to see in like 45 minutes is 2 solutions. And I would say you probably want to have a lighting situation that has more contrast to it, where there's still some sun out. So you could possibly do it with natural light, or you could do it inside just with any kind of light source, and maybe try it with either a pure backlight kind of situation, or more 3/4 off camera backlight. But I think you'll get more of the effect if you have a contrastier lit scene, like I did in that first sequence with the bottles, and then also in the second sequence with that bottle on the table. Okay, so any questions? So it's not only sort of about the technique for you. I'd like to sort of see a really cool image. My images weren't too cool. They were just about the technique. Okay, any questions? All right, everybody, have fun with it, and we'll see you back here in 45 minutes.
Okay, see you in a little bit.
All right. we'll give it another couple minutes and we'll come back on. Now we're missing Jasmine. Victoria, Emily, Chris. All right, so we'll get started. Hopefully that was a little bit of fun, along with a little bit of ingenuity. So that the whole idea was that we were sort of trying to keep it low tech and see what you could do with low tech and at the same time be creative. All right, so let's see. Victoria, you want to go ahead and share your screen and we'll start with you.
I can go second. I'm transferring them right now from my phone to my computer.
Okay, well, we'll come back to you. So let's see, Emily or Curtis, do either one of you have your stuff ready to show?
I'm putting them in the folder right now, so it'll just be another minute.
Okay, Emily, how about you?
I'm ready.
Okay.
I'm just gonna share. I'm gonna share the Lightroom page.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be in the folder per se right now.
Okay.
Because I didn't post it for you to upload yet. I'll post the assignment after class and you can upload stuff in. So for the class, just to show, you can show it any way you want.
Okay. I'm gonna do this one. Okay, so is my audio okay?
Yes.
Okay. So I was kind of trying to come up with like other interesting like solutions to it. And so of course I I used my cat. But so for this one I used like cellophane
Uh-huh.
and kind of shot through that to kind of mimic sort of like a diffusion
Is this on
material. I
your,
don't know if it totally.
is this on your camera or cell phone?
This is on my camera.
Okay.
So I kind of like crinkled it up and kind of put it just like right in front of the lens
Mhm.
and kind of shot through it. And it kind of caught the light and made kind of interesting.
Yeah. Refractions you're getting from
Yes.
the highlight, which is cool.
Yeah, so that was kind of the first. Here, I can actually, maybe I should do this. So that was kind of the first solution because I was trying to come up with some, because I don't really have any of my equipment. I'm at my mom's right now, and most of my equipment is at my dad's.
Mhm.
And so I was, trying to see what I could use. So the first idea that I had was the cellophane, and then let me see if it'll go. So then this one, it kind of looks like it's out of focus. It wasn't out of focus, but I was shooting through like a plastic lid that I had.
Uh-huh.
But it kind of created a similar effect to like lowering the contrast and I guess like the clarity or like the dehaze bar, kind of like that. So it created kind of an interesting overall
I don't know, I guess.
So it was did you say it was like a plastic lid? I didn't catch that. What was that again?
Like a Tupperware
Oh,
lid, like
a Tupperware lid. Okay.
yeah.
So yeah, that's one of the, and this is why it's sort of fun to experiment, is to see what these different materials, how it affects your clarity. And so, you know, you're probably focused correctly. I mean, you know, when you put something in front of the lens like that has any kind of thickness or diffuse look to it, it can fake out the autofocus. So you probably, I don't know if you were on autofocus or manual focus, but a lot of times you have to switch over to manual focus to get, to make sure your focus is correct. But it's going to soften the effect, even you know, if it is in focus, it's going to have a little bit of a soft focus look to it. So that's part of the idea of experimenting, so that you know what these different kinds of materials will do when you put them over, over the lens. And it definitely reduces the contrast.
Yeah, I went through a little bit in post and kind of was just like shifting things around just to kind of see
Oh yeah.
Either how much like I could bring back, or how the difference in like what boosting the contrast does using this technique, as opposed to just like an image without any sort of manipulation over
Right.
the lens.
Right. So this, you push the clarity to the plus side to sharpen it up a little bit more.
Yeah, I was just kind of curious to see like the
Yeah.
difference that it would make.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, that's good. So that's part of what we want to be doing, is experimenting. It's this combination of experimenting with the technique and then trying to apply the technique to a creative solution. Is, that's sort of what we're always trying to do with things like this. Okay, so I would say that's that's one that you could definitely use in a creative way. And I think, like, if you it might be interesting just to crop in on this, so it's like a head and shoulders shot. So, because if you look at the in the background, the pot that's on the windowsill sort of coming out of your cat's head.
Yeah, I realized that, like, as I was doing that, I was like, ah.
Now rotate it to the right. Yeah, keep
Like,
going.
I don't know how much it'll.
Oh, I see. So yeah, well, just let it crop in a little bit more even. When you as you rotate it, it'll just do that.
Yeah, I mean, if I have in a room kind of up.
So go ahead and do the done button, and let's just sort of see what it looks like cropped in.
Okay.
There you go. It's probably a little bit too, I don't know. I mean, that's something you could probably tweak a little bit more, like with the dehaze and pushing the clarity.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's just a little too I guess fuzzy
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, it's probably
To
a
be
little bit,
cropped in that.
yeah, probably, right. It's probably a little bit too soft.
Mhm.
But, you know, overall, I mean, I think, you know, you can see what the effect is of using that.
Mhm.
And, you know, the idea is that you don't need to buy a $200 filter to somewhat achieve the same effect. All right, thanks. So Curtis, how's your process coming along?
I'm all ready.
Okay, so let's take a look at yours.
Close my window. Okay, so this is the first one that I have, which is just the like plastic wrap over the lens to kind of soften the highlights a little bit. But just had my cat coming out. I thought it would look kind of cute. But so then what I ended up doing was I took a little bit of cooking oil,
Uh-huh.
and then I put a little bit of cooking oil on the front of the lens, and then I made my cat go in and back out, and then so I ended up getting this one, which I thought looked kind of nice. The colors look really painterly, and
Yeah.
the oil on it softened it up quite a bit.
So did you actually put it on the lens element, or do you have like a UV filter over the lens?
And no, that's why I said I took a piece of a plastic wrap and I put it over the front of the
Oh, okay.
lens.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I just smeared a little bit of oil,
Okay.
cooking oil around the plastic.
Okay. You were freaking me out for a minute. I missed
Oh
that.
no. Yeah, even with that, I was scared. I was like making sure there was no holes in the cellophane before I started putting any oil on there. But I just did it real quick and then ripped it off. But it came out kind of nice.
Yeah, it has a really cool look to it.
Yeah, and then I took a piece of like red flour, the see-through flour stuff,
Uh-huh.
and I wanted to see how that looks. I went outside and I just thought it was cool because it looks like it's foggy out, even though it's
Right.
not foggy. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And then one of the last things I tried, or actually the first thing I tried, was I had a water bottle that was the bottom was cut off.
Uh-huh.
So I slid it over the front of the lens, and I was able to direct the opening for the water bottle and kind of have it as like a.
So that's the sharp part that we're seeing is actually the open lid of the water bottle.
Yeah.
So the bottle is like open at the bottom.
Yeah. I cut the bottom off to make my beetroot emulsion.
Okay. Nice. That's cool. That's fun. That works pretty nicely.
Yeah, it came out pretty. It kind of gave it like a toy camera look.
That's a cool solution. I like how that's working. Nice. Well, and that's a good contrast range. You know, so that silhouette part of that really is very defined, and then it really softens at the so the edges of the bottle, right, are giving you the.
Yeah, the rest of which actually I found was really interesting because putting the bottle over there, it brought the overall ambient exposure up by a lot. So I had to bring my shutter speed down.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I took it off to check for focus, I had to bring it back up because the bottle was catching so much light that it was bringing up the whole photo.
Have you done that before with that bottle?
No, that I was sitting here, yeah, and it was just sitting next to me, so I figured I'll grab it and try it real quick.
Nice. Well, that works pretty well.
Well, thank you.
I'll have to try that. Good solution. So that's like your 99-cent solution.
Yeah, no. And I thought about it because I do some toy photography, and that's how a good way, if you don't have a fast enough lens, you could force perspective on something and make it seem.
Yeah.
If you get it right. I mean, I thought about flattening out the bottle opening so it would be a square, and it would give me a square plane of focus instead, which I could do. Yeah, you could change the shape of the opening of the bottle, and it'll be
Yeah.
good.
Oh, that's cool. Very good. Good experimentation. I like that.
Thank you. Let me stop sharing.
Okay. Victoria, how you doing?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Okay.
If you're ready, we're ready.
Okay, this is the first one that I kind of did. And then I used like a Ziploc bag. 'Cause it
Uh-huh.
was the only thing I had. And then I also used like Vaseline, but I
Uh-huh.
didn't want to put it in my phone camera either. And I was kind of Vaseline's super thick. So I was scared that it was gonna like make the picture super blurry and like distort it a lot, like the object, which it did. But I was experimenting it with it first for a little bit, so you can see on the left side how um like the two like light bulbs, I guess,
Yeah.
how are a little out of focus than the other ones. So I like played lightly with it in the beginning. And then I have a few more pictures. I have this one where I kind of just went full send.
Mhm.
Um, uh, and it did like make it super, super blurry. I was trying to play with it a little bit, try to smooth it out on the plastic bag, but also the plastic bag it's not like it's clear, but it has like this tint to it, I guess, where it's not like using saran wrap, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of the bag is kind of cloudy, like the
Right. Yeah. So it
like
already has, the bag has a little density to it.
right. But using the bag by itself like didn't give enough effect to like
Hmm.
to be super noticeable. And then this is just with a different filter. This one's just with a different filter. And then I have these other pictures that I like kind of let me see. It's on a different screen. Uh, these that I kind of didn't. Are you? I don't know what you're seeing.
Yeah. We're seeing
With the lights on?
yeah. Yeah. That's
Okay.
cool.
So I tried that and I really liked it a lot. It was interesting to see what the lights on versus the lights off. And then you can see kind of where I guess the Vaseline kind of caught the reflections of like the light
Yeah.
and the glares.
Hmm.
And then you can also see a little bit of the shadow in the back from the light fixture.
Yeah.
So I did that.
That's a very cool image because you could use that. I let's see. Do you know Photoshop very well?
No, but we get it for free, right? With the mount.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, but I wanted to download it and kind of play around with it a little bit.
Well, what this would be cool for is like a background plate, where because you could, like if we didn't know that that was a lamp in your house, you wouldn't, we'd have no context to it. So if you could use this like as a background layer on an image that was, let's say, there was a silhouette of somebody walking on like a street, and with where you just sort of see the street and the person on it in silhouette, and with no reference to buildings around, and
Hmm.
then put that as a top layer, and it would have a really cool look to it. So
Oh, I see what you mean.
yeah, so that's something. This is something that you could use like in the future. Did you shoot this on a cell phone or on your camera?
I did it on my cell phone.
Okay, so which phone do you have? What size file is that?
I have, I don't know what size file it is, but I have the 13 Pro Max.
Oh, okay, so that's like a 12 megapixel file. If you were shooting, well, if you were shooting RAW, if you have your camera set for RAW, it's like a 12 megapixel file, which save that, because if you take the Photoshop class, we do an exercise where you're using like a background plate or background layer and create a foreground and combine the two, because that would be, it looks like it's a really foggy night, you know.
Right.
I mean, you can see you have to do a little bit more work on this to make sure you didn't see the lamp heads, the detail, but that wouldn't be that big a deal to do. That's a cool look.
Thank you. And then I have one more, and then there's this one where you can see like um the different shapes from the light, like it
Yeah.
disoriented the shape of the light fixture.
Hmm.
Um, but this was my last one.
Okay. Cool. Well, good experimentation. Nice. Like to see good solutions. Okay, and Jasmine?
Yes, let me share my screen. So the first photo is like a normal photo. I wanted to do like a before and after
Yeah.
kind of situation. So this is like how it would look without the saran wrap.
Uh-huh.
And because I put plastic wrap on top of the lens
Mhm.
with a little rubber band. And then instead of using Vaseline, I wanted to use nail polish. So I used clear nail polish
Uh-huh.
and I added water
Uh-huh.
just to add more like texture and just add water.
Right.
The first image is one coat of clear nail polish,
Uh-huh.
and I like the effect. It looks like fuzzy. It does give it that dreamy look. So I think it looks great. I like the you could see kind of like it looks like the flower's moving, like if I took a picture and
Uh-huh.
it moved, but it's not moving, it's still. So
So
that's
yeah, that's got some nice effects to it. I think that's something you could also crop in on
mhm.
and just really come in on the main flower, and that could be very cool.
Yeah. And then
Has a nice effect to it. Nice effect.
yes. And then the last one is 2 coats of
Hmm.
nail polish. So
Uh-huh.
it looks lighter and more blurry and out of focus. So I thought it just looks like distorted and big.
Yeah. So that was. Did you say you had like a plastic bag?
Oh,
Or
it was saran wrap. So like
saran wrap?
plastic wrap. Yeah.
So saran wrap and then nail polish over the saran wrap.
Yes.
Okay. And so with the nail polish, does that dry fairly quickly on the saran wrap, or does it stay sort of wet?
It was wet for like maybe like 30 seconds. The nail polish says that it's fast acting, like it's a fast drying
Yeah.
nail polish.
Uh-huh.
And I have a fan going, so I'm pretty sure it dried up. And when it dries up, it kind of looks the same. 'Cause I took a picture with it dried up,
Yeah.
and then with more on the other side of the saran wrap, and it looked like crusty a little just because it started drying up.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting technique using so it's clear, obviously clear nail polish.
Yes, I tried to use glitter nail polish,
Uh-huh.
but it didn't make a difference. There was no glitter in the
Right.
on the image, so it's just the same thing.
Yeah. So it seems like with the nail polish, you could also leave like a sort of a blank spot where things would be sharper, right? With no
Yes.
effect. Like if you really wanted to control uh, yeah, where, more, let's just say, realistic looking instead of dreamy looking, you could sort of combine the two things. So that's cool. That's an interesting use of nail polish. I hadn't thought of
Yes.
using nail polish, but that's very cool, because if it dries like that so quickly, you could really control where the application could be.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, great. Well, you guys experimented with a lot of little unique things, which is the whole idea, is to come up with interesting ways to come up with alternative ways of seeing things, especially with no huge cost to it. All right, any questions about what we covered this evening? So I'll post the links for Joyce and the 2 videos that we looked at. Well, her video is in her link, and then I'll post the one about the comparison of the different filters, because that's sort of a good reference to understand the different qualities of different percentages if you haven't used diffusion filters before. And then, of course, what you're experimenting with, and all of you have used sort of like different approaches to it, which is very cool. We get some different ideas going. All right, so I'll create the assignment for in-class research, and then you can upload your results to that, and we're good to go. There won't be any homework assigned tonight, other than, again, working on your final projects. And then we'll meet next week again. And we haven't really determined yet whether it will be Zoom or in class. Or our last class meeting will be in class, but we'll see how the week goes as far as meeting up next week in person, or we'll do another Zoom. All right, any questions? All right, well, good job, everybody. And we'll see you next week, one way or the other.
All right, sounds good.
Good
See you guys.
night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, you guys.
Bye.
All right, good night.
Good night.